welcome to Parents Anonymous podcast. My name is Tal,
Hi, my name is Rupali.
and we would like to welcome all of you here today. So, just a disclaimer: the views on Parents Anonymous podcast are 100% ours. They're crafted with love, chaos, and whatever was left of our sanity after bedtime. So, yeah, thank you for joining us. What's our topic today, Rupali?
So, today we're going to be talking about labor. And more specifically, in this episode, we'll be talking about the first and second stage of labor. How does it begin? What are the highest points? And everything in between.
Sounds like a fun time. Just kidding. Yeah, so it's a process that involves both people, I think, for support as the partner. And we're going to look at the different elements to the labor, and Rapali is a great source of information for that. And we're going to try to provide that for you folks that are listening and watching us today to hopefully help assist you in having a little bit more knowledge or insight when it comes to what labor looks like.
Yeah, and this will be our experience, but in general, we will share some of the different ways that labor, begins, and as well as how it's different for people. What are some things that are important to think about as you approach labor closer and closer. And then also, if you're listening as either the support person or partner, as you've shared, and depending on what your hospital or wherever you're giving birth, if there's people that you want and can have, then think about that, who you would like, as part of your delivery and labor. So
Exactly. We mentioned in a previous episode sometimes writing a plan out, especially during that pregnancy stage, is a great tool and I believe a great skill. Just because when things are, progressing and you're in it, and it gets pretty intense. And our position here is to just be upfront and real about everything. We're not
yeah,
gonna sugarcoat
no,
anything. And labor, it is such a beautiful thing, and just childbirth in itself. But at times, it's hard, especially on the mother. And I feel like as Rupali's partner, husband, and father to our children, it's like a really important um, part for me to be involved and be in the know-how and know what Rupali wants, right? And not be
yes,
asking her during labor, like, what do you want right now? What am I supposed to,
yeah, yeah,
what am I supposed to advocate for you? No,
yeah.
that those conversations should happen well in advance.
Absolutely. Yeah. So first, let's talk about how does labor start?
Yeah.
So it really is different for people. Sometimes labor is spontaneous, meaning that all of a sudden labor has started naturally, start to feel those Braxton Hicks contractions are now actually the real contractions. They're just starting at a really, really early stage, and then they progress into active labor as you go on. So that happens for some people. For some people, spontaneous labor is connected to when their water breaks. So water breaking means that within 24 hours, ideally, your baby is expected to come out.
Yeah.
Because if that doesn't happen, there's delays, and those delays can cause complications for you and the baby. And then the other option is if you are just on your due date or you're overdue, that means you get to have some medications that will help induce your labor.
Now, that being said, every labor is different. We've mentioned in past episodes that every person, every mom is different. So how that's going to look will vary. We're going to kind of share the experience that we had
Yeah.
with when it came to Rapali being in labor and that process. But at the same time, we want to just mention if you are right now, as you listen to this, pregnant and your due date's approaching, at any time, if you're unsure about anything or you've listened to something in our podcast, I do recommend you please consult your medical practitioner if you have any questions regarding your particular case.
Mhm.
Um, so, in talking about the labor, I want to ask Rupali what that looked like for you from the moment your water broke.
Yeah. And we should also mention that for this specific episode, we will be talking about natural childbirth and labor related to that. And in our case, actually, in both of our cases, my water broke not at the 40-week mark, but actually at the 37 and a half week mark. with our daughter, so our 3-year-old. And then with our son, my water broke at the 39-week mark. Naturally, completely naturally, and both in the middle of the night. Yeah, so with that, I knew exactly the second time what happened and what we had to do going forward.
Yeah.
So with the first time, my water broke in bed. In middle of the night, I kind of just turned from one side to the other, and then I just felt like a gush of water just leaking out. And as I kind of adjusted and switched positions, more would just start come gushing out.
What were your initial thoughts when you felt the gush of water? Like, did you think your water broke or?
Yeah, like it doesn't feel like like you are incontinent and you kind of wet yourself. It doesn't feel like that. It's a completely different feeling. And it was like I said, I woke up, so I was awake already. Then I turned from one side to the other, and then all of a sudden the gush of water came, and I right away I knew that my water broke.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of tune the listeners into my perspective. It was 3 in the morning.
Yep.
We were sleeping away again. This was our first child, so we had never experienced this before. And I was like, oh, we got like 2 more weeks still till we hit the 40, and then who knows?
Could be later.
Could be later.
Yeah.
You hear all these things. So we were just kind of going off the experiences that we knew of, which wasn't much to go off of. So at 3 in the morning, you like wake me up.
Yeah.
And you're like, my water broke.
Yeah. I was like, my water broke. And then you're like, oh, okay. So you kind of like turned the lights on. And then I think you went to go grab towels. Actually, the lights weren't on yet.
No, they weren't on yet. And you're like, can you go with some towels?
Yeah.
And I had come over to your side of the bed.
Yeah.
I got out of bed from my side, walked on over, and we have like a bedside switch for our lights. So I went to go push that on your side and end up knocking over your water that you keep.
Yeah. Like if I get thirsty overnight.
Yeah. So
my glass of water.
So I was already flustered and I was like, oh my goodness. And you're like, can you please go get some towels? Like there's water everywhere.
Yeah.
I went, grabbed the towels, and I start cleaning up the water that I spilled. Again, folks, just keep in mind it's 3 in the morning. Just been, we've both been spontaneously just woken up from this water breaking.
Yeah, so. And I was like, can I have the towels? And he just brings the towels and starts cleaning the water that's at our breast. I was like, can I please have some towels, please?
Yeah. I do just want to mention for our son, who's a year old, it was almost a similar timing, early morning.
Yeah.
But that second time, as soon as that happened, I was prepared and I knew.
You knew.
Grab the towels, give
them to me.
Give them to you. Let's take care of you first. So, if you've already had one child or you're having one right now, if you decide to have more, you get more experience through trial and error.
I'll never forget that story. That experience.
So what did we do after we finally got you cleaned up, dried up a bit?
So with our daughter, after that, we called the hospital and we said, hey, my water broke. And they said, come in because we need to check whether it's amniotic fluid. And like I said, I'm very in tune with my body. So I knew exactly that it was my water breaking because it didn't feel like anything I'd ever felt before. So I knew that that's what it was, but you do have to go in and you do have to get that swab done, which basically checks and confirms that this is amniotic fluid. And so that's what we did. We drove to the hospital, like 3 something in the morning, and we got in. It was really quick. They checked my blood pressure and all my other vital signs, and then after that, they checked and they confirmed that it was indeed amniotic fluid.
Mm-hmm. So just for those folks that don't know what amniotic fluid is, you have an amniotic sac, which is where the baby is encased in the womb, and is surrounded by this fluid that provides them that comfort and safety inside the womb. So when the water breaks, that's what that break looks like, is that sac has ruptured and that fluid is now being released, saying, hey, baby's going to be delivered. So they just want to make sure that, in fact, you're going to go into labor. Can you just mention to our viewers about the testing? So what that looks like. What do they put on you to measure how the baby's doing as well?
Right. Yeah. So when you go in, if you haven't gotten to the labor part without getting any extra testing, done to check the baby's heartbeat. Then, this is when they put on two different belts on your stomach, and one usually upper and one lower. And what that does is it checks one for the baby's heartbeat, and the second belt checks for contractions to see how your uterus is contracting and relaxing and what the timing in between those contractions is. So really it's a way to one, ensure the baby's heartbeat is okay. That's the first and foremost, you're ensuring that. And then the contractions, especially if you're in active labor, then they check how close or far apart those contractions are. So in our case, when we went in, there was nothing. Like there was no contractions. It's just my water broke and they said come in. So we went in and we checked. They checked the amniotic fluids, and yes, they did put on, and make sure the baby's heartbeat is okay. And then after that, they told us to go home, and they said, "See you in 12 hours."
Yeah. So we actually had gone to our local hospital, so that's where we went. And the staff there are phenomenal. They're maternity nurses and
Hmm.
doctors that work that specialized unit. And I just want to add to that test. I remember Rapali, when she'd feel a contraction, you'd push a little button,
Yeah,
and
that was much later.
that was much later.
Yeah,
Yeah. So sometimes it's like a blur at times, and
yeah,
it like starts to come back. But
because there was no contractions when we
at
first
that
went.
point,
Yeah, so
yeah,
then we went home after that,
yeah,
and they basically told me to labor at home for as long as, well, up until a 12-hour or
yeah.
sooner. Yeah, if I needed to come in, but at least for the 12-hour point. Yeah.
And then just a mention to those support people, partners. I highly recommend if you go onto your, Apple Play Store or Google Play Store, you can look up a contractions
Yeah.
app. Uh, Try to download it well in advance, a month in advance. Again, because you never know when the baby's going to show up or the body's going to go into labor. Have that app. It's a very like a simple concept.
Mhm.
You rely on your partner, the mother, telling you, "I'm having a contraction," and oh, she'll know that she's having a contraction.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a second. But all you have to do is you toggle it that yes, she's contracting, and then hopefully she'll let you know, or you'll be able to tell that the contraction has eased, and
Yeah.
then you stop it. And then you'll have that app, and then later on, the doctor might ask, what are your contractions looking like? How far
How far
apart?
apart?
And then you can
Yeah.
just provide that information
Yeah.
easily, and you don't really have to think much about it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I do want us to talk about is labor or water breaking, whether it's spontaneous or it's, induced. It doesn't happen quick and fast, especially when it's not induced. So when it's natural, don't expect that, oh, my water's broken, or, oh, these contractions are not stopping. They're actually like, I don't know, 30 minutes apart. Whatever the timing is, just know that it doesn't happen quickly, especially when it's your first time. It's very slow for the body to progress. So for us, when they told us to go home, after we came home, you went back to sleep. And then I couldn't really sleep because actually, slowly, my contractions did start to come in that early labor. And in that time, it was very mild. Like it wasn't anything that I needed medications for. It wasn't anything that I felt like I had to sit down. Actually, I was walking around. And the funniest thing is the day that she was born, I was actually still working. So I was working from home
Yeah.
from 8 a.m. up until 3 p.m., I'd say.
Yes.
And I was good. I had a couple of meetings. I talked to a few people. I attended some meetings online, and so overall, the first bit, I actually felt quite good. And I wanted to, and again, Tal knows this, I wanted to labor at home as long as possible.
Yeah.
That was really important for me because I didn't want a bunch of things attached to me, and I didn't want that stress of people coming in and out of your room, and also, the baby's heart, like all that stress. I didn't want to
Yeah.
start right away. I wanted to actually wait as long as possible. Also, having the comfort of your own home, having accessibility to your own shower, your own clothing, all of that, like it was really important to me. So we did have, as we shared in a previous episode, we did have our bags packed already. So it was really just me wanting to stay home for as long as possible. And I did get a chance to do that. And I was really happy that I did that.
Yeah. The big thing when it comes to getting ready for, the the birthing process is being as comfortable, and then you're most comfortable in your own environment. I do want to add that we're very fortunate that we live about 15 minutes from our local hospital, where we ended up delivering the baby. So you have to keep that in mind as well. You have to look at your circumstances. If you're about 30 to an hour drive away, you might consider getting closer or being maybe at a loved one's house or family member's house and doing labor, having the early labor there. Or if some people just want to be surrounded by
Yeah.
hospital staff.
Yeah.
If that's your comfort zone, then by all means, right, do what's best for you.
Yeah. I will say that if you're really early in labor and you go in early, they will turn you away. Like if you're not in active labor, um, they will turn you away and tell you to go home. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a good idea to figure out what you would do if whether you can go back home or you can stay with somebody else, especially if you're really far away from a
yeah,
hospital. And if that's where you are actually delivering, people deliver at home, people deliver in bathtubs and all sorts of things. So
yeah.
depending on if that's your circumstance, just think about that as well.
Exactly. And our point of this podcast again is to provide you that information. And if you're about to, maybe deliver in the next few months, then that's something you and your partner or your family should discuss now.
Mhm.
Have that plan in place. The hospital, yeah, they do send you usually back home. People, again, you're best at home in your comfort area. It's better for your body. And they've actually seen studies of oxytocin being released when you're in your comfortable zone,
Yes.
which is that happy love hormone
Yeah.
that will also aid in the delivery and labor process.
Yeah. And we should share that, as we've said in previous episodes, we did have conversations about what kind of labor and delivery I want. And I had already said to Tal ahead of time that I don't want any epidural. And I said, we will not have a C section, we will have a natural delivery. And that's what we did. So throughout the whole process, that was already decided upon for both of us. So again, that kind of linked into why I wanted to labor at home for as long
Yeah.
as possible.
For those viewers listening, do you mind just mentioning a little bit more about the epidural and what is the epidural, what that looks like?
Yeah, so an epidural is essentially a way to ease the pain. It is a local anesthetic. So, meaning that they put something in the spine of your back through a needle. And what that will do is that will make you numb essentially from your belly down. So,
Okay.
you're feeling contractions much less and the pain is much less.
Okay. So just keep that in mind. If that's something that you want, please discuss with your um, medical practitioner. Everyone's different. Pain tolerances are different. Only you can really decide. And by all means, ask maybe another mom that you know what they went through, and just know that with any sort of procedure, there's always chances of complications.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Not you getting an epidural done, or even getting an epidural both ways. There's always risk.
Yeah, there's always risk. I was just about to add that is that with an epidural, there is risk, and sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not effective, actually, as
Yeah.
well. That's something to think about as well. And for me, I was very clear and I was very strong-willed in that I will um, take this pain as it comes and be one with the pain.
Mhm.
And I had really manifested that, and I had really envisioned that for myself, that this is what I want. And that is what happened
Yeah.
for me. It's different for everyone. I feel like if you're somebody, it depends also on your pain tolerance. It depends on the kind of person you are. And it depends on what kind of experiences you've heard, maybe from other moms about how things
Mhm.
went for them. And some say that I could have never done this without an epidural. And some say that I'll do this again without an epidural.
Yeah.
And, so everyone's different. And there's other times where you actually don't get that opportunity, or people have prolonged labors that end up in a C-section because the mother is so exhausted. And, there's issues sometimes with the baby and ensuring the baby's safe as well. So, yeah, that also happens,
Yeah.
where you might want something, but because of how things went during your labor, something else happened, right? And things resulted in a C-section. Maybe that's not what you wanted. And sometimes it's the opposite. Maybe people want a C-section, but they end up having a natural delivery
Yeah.
because sometimes it happens really quickly, that active labor for some people. Um, where they say, actually, you're too far gone. You can't have an epidural, or you're too far gone. No, you need to push this baby out. We're not going to do a
E-
C-section. Yeah.
Exactly. And just because you've had it a certain way the first time doesn't mean that might happen the second.
Yeah.
There really is no science that says, oh, this is the way it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It could go either way of,
Yeah.
natural birth or a C-section birth.
Yeah.
So in our case, with our first child, we're right now at a part where it's all going to be natural, and that's what you were mentioning. You were envisioning. It comes. We're not psychologists here, but we know that if you put your mind to it, or that's something that you manifest, your chances of that happening are higher, right?
Hmm.
You've all heard the story of a mother and her child gets stuck between a car, and all of a sudden she has that strength and being able to lift that car. And there has been actual noted incidences that have happened like this. So, keep your mind strong, think it through, really discuss what you want, and then where do I, as a partner, fall in this situation, in this incident, right? So, as the partner, if my wife is laboring and she's in pain, I can't unfortunately feel that pain for her, but I can support. I can say encouraging things. I can hold her hand.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about shortly here. We're probably having a back labor and what she wanted and what part I played in that to help her through that back labor.
Yeah. Yeah. So, with my contractions, as Tal shared, as things started to progress into active labor, I would say it's probably around, I don't even remember the exact timing, but it was somewhere around maybe 2 o'clock. And that's when things started to really, amp up. So, at home, after I worked for a little bit in between, I took 2 showers at home. And again, in the comfort of my home, as things started to progress more and more into active labor, I actually was on all fours at times, and I would be rocking back and forth when the contraction would start. And when the contraction would end, then I would be, walking around again and just trying to be as comfortable as I can. We did have that exercise ball at home, but it didn't actually really help me, or
No.
because I was able to just be comfortable on all fours. And at 3 o'clock, things were progressing, and I wasn't screaming, I'd say, at that point, but I definitely was in active labor.
That's
But
right. This is 3 p.m., 12 hours after the
yes,
water has broke.
yes, and at 3 p.m. is when they said you need to come back at the 12-hour point. So I wasn't ready to go back to the hospital yet because I knew that what that would mean. Like that means we're there now and we're not going anywhere after that. So at that point, I actually called our local maternity group and I was lucky to be able to talk to the doctor that has been following us through this, and I shared that I'd like to still be home for, I don't want to push it too long, but I would like to be home for at least an hour or two still to be able to be comfortable and
Hmm.
labor at home. And she was a little bit hesitant, but she knew, again, with my background and the supports, that was okay. So she said, wait as long as you can, but don't wait too long, essentially. So we did wait another 2 hours. And at that point, Tal was like, why are we still waiting? Why are we not going in? So he was kind of hovering around me at that point, and he had his app and he was, doing his counts. And at that point, the contractions were 5 minutes apart. And when we got in the car and we started driving, that's when things again escalated. I felt like to another level because instead of me kind of having like a gentle scream, I was full on screaming in the front in the passenger
Yeah.
seat.
So just before we even got in the vehicle, like Rapali mentioned, I'm timing those contractions. I'm making sure that the vehicle, our car, is ready to go. It's got our bags in there again,
Yeah.
because we had taken them with us early morning, but then we had taken them back out.
Yeah.
So we had made sure that was loaded up. I communicated with family members, with my mom in particular, that hey, we're going to be heading to the hospital soon. And then it was just like assisting Rapali, like holding her hand. Um, when she was having contractions, essentially everything is on pause. So you just, encourage her, you help her, through that contraction. Everything else around you, pause. It doesn't matter what you were doing, you focus on her and maybe hold hand and then it's almost like a really, 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 really bad cramp. That's the best I could describe it. Because watching her Polly, and it's a remarkable, and she's such a strong woman. So I was very proud of her. As she went in the car, then the clock was on. My job at that time was to drive safely within the legal speed limits as well.
Yeah.
I do have a wife that isn't having contractions, and it was just getting to the hospital safe and sound, and then figuring out the parking. So making sure find a wheelchair, get Rapali in a wheelchair, get the car parked, and then get back to you and make our way to the maternity unit.
Yeah. And by then, things, as we shared with you, were progressing really quickly for us. So I was not at a point where I could actually walk. So we did need a wheelchair. So that's why Tal is sharing that, he paused, he got into the front of the car, got inside, grabbed the wheelchair, wheeled me inside the hospital, and then went to go park the car. And I was not able to walk at that point because the contractions were coming so quickly. It's not like they were like 10 minutes apart, right? Because they were probably 4 to 5 minutes apart. I was screaming during those contractions, just screaming at the top of my lungs. That's what helped me. Everyone is different. Some people don't. Some people, envision things in their head, or do whatever complementary therapies there are other than medications to make that pain one and to kind of go through those contractions.
So you really zoned in on that kind of meditation side of the.
Yeah, meditation perhaps, but for me, it was just being one with the pain. It's hard to describe. And we will talk about the back labor and all of that too in a minute. But it really was just being one in the pain. And for me, the screaming just helped.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the back labor and all of that, because eventually, as things progressed even more and more into the peak of active labor, I did start having more and more pain in the back, which we'll talk about. But first, tell the viewers, how did you feel during that drive to the hospital?
Oh yeah, it was awesome. No, just kidding. It was very stressful. The last thing I wanted was something to go wrong, and not saying that it would, but you just start thinking like worst case scenarios. You're in pain. You're screaming at the top of your lungs. Contractions are starting and stopping. Trying to make sure we're driving safely, and like I mentioned, got the car parked, got you in the wheelchair, and then when Rapali would have contractions, I would just stop with the wheelchair. Everyone, you kind of zone out everyone in the hospital, like the main entrance. Everyone's just staring.
Yeah.
Now, as a side note, this was not my first time at that hospital escorting a contracting or laboring person, because I used to work at that same hospital as a security guard, and at 9, 10 p.m. at night, we would have a father rolling in, poor guy, and his wife getting put in a wheelchair, and then I actually would tell the husband, go find parking, you know where maternity is, and then I would use my special access to wheel that, contracting mother to the maternity and up a story or two. So I had that experience, but when you're in it yourself and it's your wife and your future mother of your child, you're just like, oh my goodness, and you just try to zone everything else out, and you get her up to that maternity unit as soon as possible. And just know that it's a really good time to know all your partner's information. So when we got to the front of the maternity unit, I was then able to have your card. So where we live, you have a card that's got your medical information on it. You provide that card to them and date of birth, all that kind of stuff. So we provided all that information, and then a nurse came out and was able to then take over and assist us from there.
Mm-hmm. So as we were walking up to the maternity unit, because we had to go across the whole lobby, it's a very large hospital, up through the elevator and then onto that maternity unit. Every contraction, Tal had to stop. And there was multiple times that he had to stop before we actually got to the front of the building there. And I do have to say, just through the driving to the hospital and that part because from 3 p.m. I could tell Tal was stressed, because that's what he had heard the medical professionals say, that, hey, come back in 12 hours. And he saw, obviously, I was not complying with that, and I was taking my own direction. So I have to say, I'm very thankful that you were able to follow my lead and trust my instinct in that time instead of pushing me to say we have to go right now.
Hmm.
Because I wanted to stay as much as I could at home, and I'm really glad I did, and I'm really glad that you were able to just, trust me in that time. Yeah.
Stay tuned for part 2.